So I'm going to move on. Sean, I think you're online, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Sean, would you like to move forward with your presentation?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to hear everyone else's about everyone else's research interest. It's really useful. So I did my PhD in kinesiology in the University of Virginia. And before that, I did my PhD in a field called adapted physical activity. So kind of focused on inclusivizing, we'll say, physical activity. And that was in the University of Leuven in Belgium. Since then, I have, broadly speaking, have three kind of research strands. The first is I engage people with disabilities. That is primarily focused on adults with autism and adults with intellectual disabilities in qualitative research to understand and amplify their perspectives of health and the multi-level factors that influence their health. As I said, that focused a lot on autistic adults, adults with intellectual disabilities, children with autism, parents of children with autism, and samples like that. My second strand focuses on what's called time use epidemiology, which looks at how we spend our time. And of course, I'm most interested in how we spend our time related to health, primarily focusing on physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep, and about how those behaviors kind of interact and influence health. Again, I focus that work primarily on people with developmental disabilities or autism and intellectual disabilities. Most recently, that project, we sent out ActiWatch devices to a large sample, well, relatively large sample of autistic adults in the US to look at their physical activity, sedentary behavior, and their sleep. And finally, I've done some intervention-based or more experimental research where I look at web-based interventions that's primarily focused on increasing physical activity or improving motor skills of children with disabilities, primarily autism and intellectual disabilities again. So that's been my, they're kind of the main strands of my work. And these are some of the most recent publications. The first one there was a new methodology that I used that I'd love to use again. I found it very interesting. It's a correspondence study, or sometimes called an audit study methodology. And it's a more unbiased means of assessing potential discriminatory behaviors. That involved me contacting hundreds of fitness centers in the United States, assessing how they responded to people who wanted to use the services of the fitness center, depending on whether they have a disability or not. And it is very interesting just to see the different reactions that a requester might get, whether they have a disability or not. So a very interesting, slightly tricky methodology, because your participants as such don't know that they're being studied. So it's a bit tricky, but I found it very useful and I think insightful, and I'd love to use that methodology again. And some other studies then there are focused on autistic adults and their health behaviors and perspectives of health, which I kind of focused on over the last 2 or 3 years, I suppose, in particular. So that's my work, and I'd be delighted to collaborate with anyone out there. So that's me.